Hercule Poirot is invited to a grand manor, where a mysterious death interrupts a high-stakes chess match. When the marble chessboard reveals a hidden clue beneath its polished squares, Poirot realizes the game itself is part of a deadly riddle. Chapter 1. The pawn that shouldn't have moved. Storm had arrived. With all the suddenness of a trapdoor springing beneath one's feet, thunder rolled over the Surrey countryside, and the rain lashed against the high windows of Renfield Hall, a sprawling Edwardian estate nestled among manicured hedges and gnarled oaks. Inside, warm lamplight flickered over polished wood, antique vases, and the stern portraits of generations of Renfields who stared with disapproving eyes at the modern intrusions of laughter, cocktail shakers, and wireless music. The house was full that weekend. The occasion, a birthday gathering for Sir Hugo Renfield, business magnate, amateur chess master, and lover of ritual. 62 today. Sir Hugo had summoned family and a select handful of acquaintances to celebrate in the only manner he knew, formally, competitively. And under his rules, there was the chess tournament, of course, an annual affair for those who had been granted the privilege or burden of Sir Hugo's esteem. This year, as in all years, the matches would be held in the oak-paneled drawing room, on the marbled chessboard Sir Hugo prized above all else. Imported from Florence, its surface was a tessellation of black and white stone, the pieces carved from obsidian and ivory, said to be centuries old. Sir Hugo insisted it had character. Others said it had a curse. Dinner that evening had been a tense affair. The guests, 6 of them, not counting the house staff, shared polite conversation and wary glances across the long table. Lady Renfield, Marjorie, kept up a brittle smile, her thin fingers fluttering like startled birds whenever Sir Hugo addressed her. She wore an emerald necklace, conspicuously large, conspicuously new. Hugo had presented it earlier in the evening, with a sly smile and the words, "To compensate for a year of my indulgences." Their son, Geoffrey, sat hunched beside his father, his face pale and his dark curls damp with rain. He was rarely home from Cambridge and never entirely at ease in the ancestral seat. He fiddled with his wine-glass and responded to questions in clipped syllables. Next came Miss Celestine Parlow, Hugo's personal assistant, a woman of 35 with sharp cheekbones and sharper instincts. She recorded Hugo's games, managed his schedule, and was reputed to have once rewritten his will under dictation. Her eyes lingered on no one long enough to betray emotion. Across from her sat Dr. Edwin Halbrake, a portly, soft-voiced man with nicotine-stained fingers and a penchant for quoting Greek tragedy. He had been the family physician for nearly 2 decades and had once treated Geoffrey for a riding accident. Tonight he looked tired, his gaze drifting now and then to the chessboard in the corner of the room, as if troubled by something more than indigestion. Then there was Mr. Bernard Claypole, Hugo's solicitor, a lanky man in his 40s, all angles and observation. He rarely spoke unless spoken to, but was always present at the house during such weekends. To keep the books balanced, he would say with a knowing smile. Lastly, Miss Iris Fenla, young, statuesque, and mysterious. She had arrived in a hired motor car with an Italian chauffeur and a single piece of luggage. Introduced as a distant cousin from Venice, her connection to the family was tenuous at best. Yet Sir Hugo had greeted her with a surprising degree of affection. After the last course had been cleared, Hugo stood at the head of the table. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, "we come now to the highlight of the evening. Our annual tournament begins anew, but this year," he paused dramatically, "there will be stakes." Gasps and arched eyebrows followed. "I have decided," he continued, "that the winner shall receive something rather dear to me." He turned and gestured to the sideboard, where Celestine opened a velvet box. Inside lay a key silver, aged, with a serpent carved into the bow. "This," said Hugo, Opens the black drawer of the chess cabinet. Within it, I have placed a document. A prize beyond estimation. Lady Renfield visibly blanched. Geoffrey's hand jerked on his napkin. Claypole blinked once, slowly. The games will begin tonight, Sir Hugo said. And may the best mind prevail. At precisely 9 o'clock, the drawing room was readied. The marbled board was set. Rain thudded against the high glass, and lightning cracked the sky in jagged seams. Hugo faced Iris for the first match. Celestini took her seat with a notepad, the others watching in silence. But just 15 minutes into the game, there was a disruption. A loud crash from the library. Then silence. Everyone rushed toward the sound. The door was ajar, and inside on the floor beneath the fireplace lay Sir Hugo Renfield, a single pawn clutched in his right hand, the marbled black bishop wedged beneath his temple like a bludgeon. He was dead. Poirot would later say that even in death, Sir Hugo looked calculating. But at that moment, amidst gasps and the shriek of Lady Renfield, there was only one certainty. The game had changed, and someone had played a move that would have consequences far more permanent than checkmate. Chapter 2. The bishop in the fire-lithe library smelled faintly of cigar smoke and old varnish. The storm's fury muffled against the thick walls, casting the room in an unnatural hush as though time itself had frozen in deference to the man. Lying sprawled beneath the empty hearth, Sir Hugo Renfield's gray eyes were fixed open, glassy and accusatory. The black bishop lay just beside his right temple, a fine crack running along its polished obsidian curve. Lady Renfield's scream echoed like shattered crystal. Geoffrey caught her before she fell, his arms tightening around her frail shoulders. Celestini Parlow, ever composed, crossed the room and knelt beside the body, her expression unreadable. Dr. Halbrake moved slower, clutching his medical bag as he approached, though even from the threshold, it was clear to all, Sir Hugo Renfield was dead. Bernard Claypole stood still near the door. His eyes narrowed. He adjusted his spectacles but did not speak. "Is there anything to be done?" Iris Fenley's voice was low, her accent faintly European. Dr. Halbrake crouched, fingers probing the throat and wrist with the mechanical detachment of long practice. Then, slowly, he shook his head. "No, rigor has not yet set in, but the skin is cold. I estimate death occurred within the last half hour." "The chess match," Celestini said softly. "We had just begun. 15 minutes, perhaps." Halbrake nodded. "That would be consistent." The pawn that Sir Hugo clutched caught Geoffrey's eye. It was white carved from ivory, the queen's pawn, if memory served. Why would he be holding a white piece? He murmured, "No reason at all," muttered Claypole, half to himself. Unless it was meant to send a message. Lady Renfield made a small, strangled sound. A message. He was a dramatist, wasn't he? Claypole replied without looking at her. Even in death, a symbol in the hand, a bishop at the head. It all smells of theatricality. Halbrake stood slowly. "The wound is clean but forceful. The bishop may have been used as a weapon, but it would require considerable strength or surprise." "He was found alone," Iris said. "How could anyone have?" "There are 2 doors," Celestini interrupted, "standing now. The main entrance and the servants' passage behind the bookcase. Both were unlocked." Everyone turned toward the paneling. Halbrake moved to examine the hidden door. "Yes, slightly ajar." Lady Renfield looked up. "Then someone could have come in that way." "Someone not at the table. But who?" Geoffrey asked. "We were all there for the match," Claypole interjected. "The staff." "Sir Hugo dismissed them early," Celestini replied. "Said he didn't want interruptions for the tournament. I personally saw them leave for their quarters." "Then it was someone among us," Iris said coldly. A silence fell, thick as the storm outside. "We shouldn't linger," Halbrake said at last. "We must contact the authorities." "There's no telephone," said Lady Renfield. Her voice brittle again. "The storm knocked out the line after tea." Geoffrey nodded. "And the bridge into town will be flooded. We're cut off until morning." Claypole adjusted his tie. "Then it falls to us to preserve the scene. No one leaves. No one touches anything." "Agreed." "Celestini," said that. Geoffrey stared at the bishop on the rug. "Why a chess piece?" he asked again, more to himself. "I imagine," said a new voice from the doorway, "that the symbolism was no accident." All heads turned. There stood a man, impeccably dressed in a gray wool suit, his patent leather shoes gleaming despite the rain. His mustache was symmetrical, his expression composed. He held a travel hat under one arm and regarded the room with quiet precision. "I beg your pardon," he said in a clipped Belgian accent, "but I believe I am expected." "You," Geoffrey blinked. "You're Monsieur Poirot?" Hercule Poirot inclined his head. "Indeed." Sir Hugo extended an invitation for this evening's festivities. "I took a later train, and the driver only just managed the hill before the road collapsed behind us. I arrived as the clock struck 9. Celestini stepped forward. "You were to be his opponent in the final round. He saved the last match for you." Poirot's eyes lingered on the body. "So I see." He set down his hat and approached the hearth. "A bishop," he murmured. "Not an obvious weapon, but symbolic." "Yes." His gaze shifted to the white pawn in the dead man's hand. "Curious. The bishop attacks diagonally, and yet the pawn moves forward." Poirot turned to the group, his voice measured. "Ms. Amos, I am sorry to intrude upon your shock, but I believe you will find my presence here most useful." Lady Renfield stared at him with pleading eyes. Will you help us?" Poirot smiled gently. "But of course, you are all my suspects now." Chapter 3. Secrets behind the marble drawing room had been transformed from a place of leisure into a silent theater of tension. Poirot stood at the center, perfectly still, as if waiting for the curtain to rise on some psychological drama he alone knew the shape of. Outside, the storm rumbled on, relentless in its fury, while inside, the marbled chessboard immaculate and untouched stood like a silent judge, presiding over guilty hearts. Poirot's gray eyes swept across the assembled faces. "Let us begin with facts, n'est-ce pas? It is always better to place the pawns before the game." Claypole gave a short breath through his nose. "You mean suspects?" Poirot raised one eyebrow. "In chess, Monsieur Claypole, all pieces serve a function. But in murder, everyone begins as a pawn until, perhaps, they reveal themselves as a queen." There was a rustle of unease. "I will ask each of you to remain at Renfield Hall until the authorities arrive," Poirot continued. "But let us not waste the night. Time," he tapped his watch gently, "does not wait for justice." Celestini folded her arms, watching Poirot with a flicker of calculation. "And what precisely do you intend to do?" "Observe, question, understand. It is not enough to ask who could have struck the blow, we must know why they would do so. Motive, means, and opportunity, but also psychology." Poirot's gaze lingered on the bishop. "A piece used not just to kill, but to deliver a message." Lady Renfield shivered. "What sort of message?" Poirot turned to her gently. "Madam, we shall uncover that together." He gestured toward the drawing-room chairs. "We begin with the setting. Who sat where during the match?" Geoffrey spoke first. "My mother and I were at the far end, near the windows. Miss Parlow was beside the record player, and Dr. Halbrake stood against the bookshelf. Mr. Claypole remained near the fireplace. I," Iris added, "was opposite Sir Hugo. I was his opponent for the first game." Poirot nodded. "And you saw nothing unusual?" "There was a moment," Iris admitted, "when Sir Hugo seemed distracted. He looked past me, toward the door, as if expecting someone." "Which door?" "The servants' panel," she replied, glancing toward it. "Interesting," Poirot said softly. "And the timing?" The crash from the library came soon after, Geoffrey offered. Not even 10 minutes into the game, Poirot paced slowly toward the chessboard, studying the elegant pieces with his hands clasped behind his back. Was the match being recorded? Celestini nodded. I was annotating every move. It was Sir Hugo's habit to study each game later. Poirot motioned to her. May I see your notations? She retrieved a leather-bound notepad from her handbag and handed it to him. Poirot scanned the neat columns. The final move, knight to f3. He frowned slightly. A modest opening. Poirot moved to the board and began recreating the position. The room watched in silence as he aligned the pieces precisely. When finished, he pointed to the empty square. One piece missing, the white pawn, Geoffrey said quietly. The one in his hand. Poirot nodded. Curious. Removing a piece mid-game is unusual, unless it was taken to make a point or planted afterward. Could it have been symbolic? Asked Claypole. A pawn in hand, a bishop at the head. A pawn, murmured Poirot, is often underestimated. But if it crosses the board, it can become anything. Even a queen. His eyes moved slowly across the room. Tell me, did Sir Hugo have enemies? Silence. Then Dr. Halbrake cleared his throat. He had no shortage of disagreements. But outright enemies? Not publicly, no. Celestine's voice was calm. He was a controlling man, domineering. Some called him visionary, others a tyrant. Many people feared Hugo, said Lady Renfield suddenly, her voice more steely than sorrow now. But not because he was dangerous, because he always knew too much. He had a way of discovering secrets, then storing them. Poirot turned. Storing them where, madam? She hesitated. In the black drawer of the chess cabinet. The same drawer, said Claypole, to which he mentioned the key was the prize. She nodded. Poirot's single quotes, eyes narrowed. And the contents of that drawer has anyone checked? No one would dare, said Geoffrey. He kept it locked. Even I never even saw inside. Poirot approached the chess cabinet, a fine walnut piece beneath the window. He studied the keyhole, then straightened. I must request that the drawer remain sealed until the authorities arrive. But I believe if we understand what Hugo kept hidden, we will understand why he was killed. And who did it? Added Iris. Indeed, Poirot said, folding his arms. For this crime was not of passion, nor impulse. No, this was cold, prepared. A message written in ivory and marble. The lights flickered briefly as thunder cracked above. Poirot turned back to them, his voice soft but certain. Tonight, Ms. Amos, someone here believed themselves cleverer than the board they played upon. But the game it is not yet over. Chapter 4. The night that guarded a Leith grandfather clock in the hallway struck 11, its resonant chime echoing through the manor like a final verdict. In the drawing room, Poirot remained motionless, eyes fixed on the marbled chessboard where he had reconstructed the final known position. He traced the contours of the white knight with one finger, then looked up suddenly as if some unspoken connection had drawn itself across the pieces. Miss Parlow, he said gently, you were recording the game, May I ask what was Sir Hugo's demeanor during the match? Celestini straightened, betraying no emotion. Focused, as always. Perhaps a touch more. Theatrical than usual. Poirot tilted his head. Theatrical? She nodded. He liked to test his opponent's confidence, making them second-guess their own moves. But tonight, he was unusually dramatic. Flourishes, comments, as if he were performing for an invisible audience. Poirot's mustache twitched. And did he comment on the black drawer? Celestine's expression darkened, only to say that whoever won tonight's tournament would unlock what he called the culmination of a life strategy. A strange phrase, Poirot murmured, and cryptic. Across the room, Geoffrey stood abruptly. I don't believe he meant to give it away at all. It was just another of his games. Lady Renfield raised an eyebrow. Do you think he would lie about such a thing? Geoffrey turned to her. He lied about everything else. Poirot raised a hand to steady the tension in the room. Monsieur Geoffrey, I understand your father may not have been the easiest of men, but let us speak plainly now. When did you last see him alone? Geoffrey faltered. Before dinner. Around 6, we had. Words. Geoffrey looked down. I told him I didn't want to be part of his charade this year. The tournament. The theatrics. He told me I was a disappointment. Claypole snorted quietly. That was rather his refrain. Poirot's gaze sharpened. And after this disagreement, what did you do? I went to the stables, needed air, then returned just before the tournament began. Was anyone with you? Geoffrey shook his head. No. Poirot made a small note in his pocketbook and turned his attention. And you, Dr. Halbrake? You were near the bookshelf during the match? The doctor, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, adjusted his glasses. Yes, I observed from a distance. I was not invited to play chess, was never my strength. Poirot nodded. And in the library, when you examined the body, you said rigor had not yet set in. May I ask, what is your estimation of the weapon's effect? Halbrake's brow furrowed. The bishop is a dense, polished stone. Blunt force, likely a single blow to the side of the head. He wouldn't have cried out. Instant death. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Then the killer knew what they were doing. This was not a blow struck in panic. It was chosen, calculated. There was a pause, filled only by the hum of the wind battering the windows. Lady Renfield cleared her throat delicately. You've asked about us, Monsieur Poirot. But what of our guests? She gestured to Iris Fenla. We know very little about Miss Fenla. Why was she invited? All eyes turned. Iris's expression remained calm. Sir Hugo reached out to me 2 months ago. He said we were distantly related through his mother's side, that he wished to reconnect with his Italian ancestry. Did he ever meet you before this weekend? Claypole asked skeptically. No, but he wrote often. Poirot stepped closer. And did he mention the drawer? The tournament? Iris hesitated. He said. He had something to share. A secret the family had buried. Lady Renfield stiffened. What secret? Iris looked down. He didn't say. Only that it was written in the drawer. Poirot tapped his chin. A secret worth killing for. Perhaps. Silence again. Poirot allowed it to stretch just long enough before continuing. One last question, he said. Eyes scanning the group. Does anyone know of any changes Sir Hugo made to his will in recent months? Claypole answered at once. He made no official changes through me, but unofficially. Poirot pressed. Claypole hesitated, then sighed. He mentioned he was drafting something. Personal, a codicil, handwritten. Said he would place it in the drawer after the final match. Celestine's eyes narrowed. If that's true, then whoever controls that drawer now could control everything. Poirot nodded slowly, which makes the bishop not merely a weapon but a distraction. While we fixated on the drama of his death, the real prize may already have been taken. You think the drawer's been opened? Geoffrey asked. I think. Poirot replied. We must check at once. But when they crossed the room to the cabinet, a fresh surprise awaited them. The black drawer was locked. The silver key that was once displayed in the velvet box was gone. Vanished. Poirot looked up, his voice barely above a whisper. Ah, the game has shifted again. Chapter 5. A move made in silence. The absence of the silver key cast a new and chilling shadow over the room. Until now, Sir Hugo's death had felt like a singular rupture, violent, sudden, but isolated. Now it was clear someone had already moved beyond the murder. Someone had planned for what came after. The key is gone. Celestine repeated, her voice tighter than before. I set it on the sideboard myself. And you saw no one approach it? Poirot asked. I stepped away to make a telephone call before the match began. When I returned, The box was still there. Poirot paced to the sideboard, examining the velvet-lined case. Its indentation bore the faint outline of the missing key, but nothing else. No smudges, no scratches. He knelt, peering close at the surface, then straightened with a frown. There are no fingerprints, wiped clean? Suggested Claypole, or taken with gloves, said Poirot, which implies premeditation. Lady Renfield's fingers twisted around her necklace, but the lights never dimmed. No one left the drawing room. Surely someone would have noticed if another had stepped away. Not if they timed it during the crash, Geoffrey said slowly, when we all ran to the library. That moment chaotic, panicked anyone could have slipped back and taken the key, and returned unnoticed. Poirot nodded. Yes, it would take only a moment. Then the key could be anywhere now, said Iris quietly. Poirot's eyes flicked to her, or already used. The drawer may have been opened while we searched the library, but it was locked when you examined it just now. Claypole objected. Locked again afterward. Perhaps, Poirot replied, or replaced with another identical drawer, though that would be theatrical even for our murderer. Geoffrey crossed the room and knelt beside the cabinet, tugging at the drawer. It's solid, and the lock hasn't been tampered with, at least not visibly. Poirot tapped his fingers together. Then the question becomes, who had the greatest need to access what was inside? Anyone who feared what Hugo might reveal, said Celestini, too quickly. Or anyone hoping to gain from what he promised, added Lady Renfield. Poirot's gaze turned toward the chessboard once more. And what of the piece in his hand, the white pawn? What message might it hold? It's a weak piece, muttered Claypole. Vulnerable. Sacrificed easily. Poirot shook his head. But capable of becoming powerful. A pawn that reaches the 8th rank may be promoted. It is a metaphor. For what? Asked Halbrake, folding his arms. For transformation, Poirot replied softly. For someone overlooked. Who intends to become something more? The implications hung in the air like thunderclouds. Poirot turned his attention again. Now we looked to the Black Bishop, a piece chosen not at random, but with significance. Did any of you see it move during the match? Celestini flipped through her notes. He had advanced the bishop 1 square before the crash. That was the last recorded move. And yet, Poirot murmured, it was found far from the board under his head. Strange. Could someone have taken it earlier? Iris asked if they had planned the strike beforehand. Poirot said, perhaps. Or perhaps the killer removed it during the chaos while we all were in the library. Geoffrey spoke suddenly. But that means the killer followed him into the library before the rest of us arrived. Exactly. Poirot replied, a matter of moments only. But moments, Ms. Amos, may be everything. He stepped back from the cabinet, turning to face them all once more. We now know the following. The killer used a bishop to strike. Sir Hugo held a pawn in his hand. The key to the drawer is missing, and the only time unaccounted for by all of you is the brief interval between the crash and the moment we entered the library. He paused. And so, we must now examine that interval not just as a window for action, but as a window for psychology. Who among you had reason to fear the drawer? To resent Hugo Renfield so deeply that death alone would not be sufficient? Who needed to silence him and steal what he kept hidden? No one answered. Poirot's gaze sharpened. Then I shall interview each of you, one by one. We will speak of your movements, your histories, and your secrets. Lady Renfield bristled. Are we to be interrogated like common criminals? None, Poirot said with a small bow. You are to be understood like uncommon ones. Then, with perfect calm, he walked to the fireplace, warming his hands before the dying coals behind him. No one moved. For now, the pieces remained on the board. But the game was beginning to quicken. Ask Chapter 6. The assistant's gambit storm outside had settled into a steady percussion, as if nature itself had grown weary of fury and now tapped its fingers on the rooftop and thought. Inside the study, a smaller room, just off the drawing room, with green velvet chairs and a faint scent of sandalwood, Poirot sat opposite Celestine Parlow. A single lamp cast long shadows, and the faint crackle of the fireplace lent the scene a confessional air. Celestine sat with her back straight and her chin lifted, her tailored navy dress impeccably pressed. There was no tremble in her hands, no hesitation in her gaze. She had spent years under Hugo Renfield's scrutiny. She was used to being observed. Poirot steepled his fingers. "You worked for Sir Hugo for how long, mademoiselle?" 7 years, ah. Poirot smiled faintly. A long time to orbit a man like him. One either becomes indispensable or devoured. She returned the smile without warmth. "I managed to remain in the former category. Indeed. You kept his schedule, managed his travel, recorded his matches. Did you also keep his secrets?" Celestine paused, her expression unreadable. "Some, the ones he let me see." Poirot nodded slowly. "You are precise, controlled. I admire that. But such qualities come at a price, non? You learn not only how to maintain another's feuille, but how to build your own." Her smile sharpened. "You think I'm hiding something." "I think," Poirot replied, "that a woman in your position knows more than she says always." He leaned slightly forward. "Let us speak plainly. Did Sir Hugo ever mention changing his will?" She hesitated. "Yes, once, in late March." "What was the nature of this change?" Celestine's voice was crisp. "He said he was going to include a clause acknowledging a familial connection to someone previously excluded." Poirot tilted his head. "Miss Iris Fenla?" She didn't blink. "That would be my assumption. And how did you feel about that?" "I felt," she said, "that he was testing me. He often dangled provocation, said things to observe my reaction." Poirot raised an eyebrow. "Did you pass his test?" I made no comment. That was usually the safest course. He studied her face. "Yet tonight, he did not choose you for the match. You were recording, not playing. He rarely let me play. You were not offended?" Celestine's expression hardened slightly. "I did not need the board to prove my value." Poirot glanced at his notes. "Before the match began, you stepped away to make a telephone call." "To whom?" "To the train station. I wanted to confirm Monsieur Poirot's rival." Poirot blinked. "You called to check on me?" "Yes. Sir Hugo had insisted that your match was to be the climax of the tournament. He said it would be what was the phrase, a checkmate in every direction. He was excited. I thought it would calm him to know you were en route." Poirot rubbed his mustache. "And yet, your absence coincided with the key's disappearance." "I returned within 5 minutes," she said coolly, "and the key box was untouched when I last saw it." "Touched, perhaps," Poirot said quietly, "but unnoticed. Sometimes, mademoiselle, the eyes see only what they are ready to see." He let the silence stretch. "One final question. What do you believe was in the drawer?" Her gaze didn't waver. "A secret meant to unsettle us." "Why do you say so?" "Because Sir Hugo only ever revealed things to destabilize. He didn't share. He weaponized." Poirot leaned back in his chair. "Merci, Mademoiselle Parlow. You have answered with elegance." She stood slowly, and with restraint, Monsieur Poirot, as she exited, her heels clicking softly on the wood. Poirot remained seated, alone in thought. Outside the door, Geoffrey hovered by the hallway lamp. "Well," Poirot looked up, "she is as exact as the second hand of a Swiss watch. But that, mon ami, is not always a virtue. A clock that runs perfectly may still be hiding the wrong time." Geoffrey frowned. "You think she's lying?" Poirot tapped his fingers on the armrest. "Not lying, but managing. She manages perception. Her own, most of all." He rose. "Now, let us prepare for the next interview. The board is set, and each piece must now move in turn, from the darkness beyond the study." The sound of the storm surged once more. the game was far from over, and Celestine Parlow had made her move. Chapter 7. The sun's unspoken checked study remained dimly lit, cloaked in the warm flicker of firelight and Poirot's measured silence. Geoffrey Renfield entered next, hands shoved into his pockets, his stride uneven as if he wished he were anywhere else. His brown curls were damp from having stood too long near a drafty corridor window, and his shoulders slumped under the weight of something unspoken. Poirot gestured to the same green velvet chair where Celestine had sat moments earlier. Geoffrey obliged, his leg jiggling almost immediately. "You knew your father well?" Poirot began softly. Geoffrey gave a humorless snort. "No one knew my father well, least of all his family." Poirot tilted his head. "And yet, you were his heir, in name only," Geoffrey muttered. "His true heir was that bloody chessboard." "Still," Poirot said gently, "you came to the estate for his birthday." "I was summoned," Geoffrey corrected. "Invited in the way one is commanded to attend a trial." "He said it would be a significant occasion. I suppose he wasn't wrong." Poirot studied him for a moment. "There was anger between you. There was distance," Geoffrey replied. "But yes, I didn't live up to him. He didn't understand why I didn't want his money or his legacy. All I ever wanted was peace." Poirot folded his hands. "You said earlier you went to the stables after an argument. Tell me again what was said." Geoffrey hesitated. "I told him I didn't want anything to do with this weekend. I didn't want to play his games. And he said," his jaw clenched, "he said I was still just a pawn. A piece that moves only forward because it doesn't know how to turn." Poirot raised an eyebrow. "A cutting remark. He wanted control," Geoffrey said bitterly. "Even of how we grieved him." Poirot paused. "You mentioned earlier that you never saw what was in the black drawer. Did he ever hint at it?" "Only cryptically. He'd make these little jabs, always implying there was something in it that could change everything." "And how did that make you feel?" Geoffrey looked up sharply. "Like I was being blackmailed without even knowing the crime." Poirot gave a small nod. "Did he ever speak of Iris?" Geoffrey shrugged. "She came out of nowhere. Father said she was family, that she had rights, but he didn't say what kind. I tried to ask him directly once. He said I'd know soon enough." Poirot tapped his notebook lightly. "You seemed surprised when the key vanished." "Of course I was surprised, but not alarmed." Geoffrey narrowed his eyes. "Are you suggesting I took it?" "I suggest nothing yet, Monsieur Renfield. I observe." Geoffrey leaned forward. "I was in the drawing room when the crash came. I ran with the rest of them. I never touched that key. And yet," Poirot said mildly, "you knew where it was. You knew what it unlocked, and you had reason to fear what your father might reveal." Geoffrey rose suddenly. "He was always playing games, Poirot. Psychological ones. Maybe he planned this whole thing just to make us suspect each other. That would be the ultimate joke, wouldn't it?" Poirot did not move. "You are angry, understandably, but anger clouds judgment, and murder mon ami requires a kind of clarity." Geoffrey hesitated. "So you think I'm capable of that kind of clarity?" Poirot looked him in the eye. "I think you are capable of many things. Most sons are, when their fathers leave them no room to be anything else." The words lingered. Geoffrey opened his mouth as if to reply, but said nothing. Instead, he turned and walked out, the door clicking gently behind him. Poirot remained seated, his fingertips pressed together. He did not believe Geoffrey was the killer. Not yet, but the boy's bitterness was deep-rooted, and bitterness when neglected long enough often blossomed into something dangerous. And Geoffrey Renfield, for all his talk of distance and detachment, had returned to this house not to play or to watch the board burn. That, Poirot knew, was still to be seen. Chapter 8. The doctor's quiet prescription. Edwin Halbrake entered the study with a slow, deliberate gait. His heavy-set frame moved with the cautious solemnity of someone accustomed to measuring pain in others and perhaps more quietly, in himself. His fingers, though thick and calloused from years of use, were meticulously clean, folded neatly around his stethoscope as though even now he might be called to resuscitate a ghost. Poirot gestured toward the chair with a small nod. "Please, Doctor, you are the most practiced observer among our company, yes?" Halbrake sat down carefully. "I see symptoms. That is my role. But I don't always presume to know the cause." Poirot offered a faint smile. "But you, like me, notice details. The shifting of a hand, the tension in my jaw, things unspoken." Halbrake exhaled. "Yes, I suppose that's true." Poirot flipped his notebook. "You have known the Renfields for how long?" 22 years. I was present for Geoffrey's birth, cared for Hugo's late brother when he passed. I've seen more of that family than most would care to." Poirot leaned forward slightly. "And in all that time, how would you describe your relationship with Sir Hugo?" Halbrake hesitated. "Professional, respectful, but not warm." "You did not like him?" "I did not dislike him," the doctor replied carefully. "But he was difficult, arrogant. He had a way of turning every interaction into a match, a maneuver. I stopped trying to win long ago." Poirot nodded slowly. "And yet you remained in his service." "He was loyal in his own way. Paid well, never questioned a bill." "Did he ever confide in you?" "Health matters?" "Rarely," Halbrake said. "He was a man who believed weakness was a kind of failure. But I can tell you this, he was not in perfect health. Indeed, he had elevated blood pressure, a concern I raised multiple times. He dismissed it naturally, laughed it off, as if the idea of mortality were beneath him." Poirot paused. "Did you see him the day of his death? Before the tournament?" "Yes, late afternoon. I stopped by his study to check on a minor complaint, fatigue mostly. He poured himself a brandy, waved off my concern, and asked whether I'd ever seen a chess match between brothers who didn't know they were brothers." Poirot's eyebrows rose. "A strange question." Halbrake nodded. "He was like that, always circling some private metaphor. I thought it was part of the game he was planning." Poirot narrowed his eyes. "You took it as nonsense?" "No, I took it as something I wasn't meant to understand. He was hinting, I think, at some revelation, something he intended to expose tonight." Poirot said nothing for a long moment. "Then, did he say anything about Miss Fenla?" Halbrake rubbed the bridge of his nose. "Only that she was important to the endgame, that she would be a queen in time." Poirot's lips twitched at the metaphor. "And you?" "I said I didn't understand." He replied, "You will when the drawer opens." Poirot glanced up. "And were you present in the drawing room during the match?" "I was standing near the bookshelf. I watched the opening moves. I observed Celestini making her notations. Nothing seemed out of place. Did you notice anyone stepping away?" "Not directly," Halbrake said. "But during the commotion after the crash I saw Claypole reach for something near the fireplace. Before joining us in the hall." Poirot looked up sharply. "You're certain?" "I saw his silhouette. Briefly. Couldn't make out what he touched." Poirot made a quiet note. "And once in the library, you were the first to examine the body." "Yes." Poirot tilted his head. "And did anything seem?" Staged Halbrake frowned. "That bishop was not where it should have been." "Meaning?" "Sir Hugo's head wasn't just struck. It was positioned, cradled as though the bishop had been laid beneath it. Not dropped, placed." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Then someone wanted us to see it." "To notice, yes," Halbrake murmured. "And to interpret it wrongly." Poirot rose and offered his hand. "Merci, Doctor. You have been most helpful." Halbrake accepted the handshake. "Do you suspect me, Poirot?" "I suspect everyone, Doctor," Poirot replied softly. "But I believe you see more than you say." As Halbrake left, Poirot turned to the fire. The image of the bishop beneath the skull ceremonial, deliberate, lingered like a symbol waiting to be translated. And in Dr. Halbrake's words, another clue had emerged, not just who struck the blow, but who curated the scene afterward. The murderer, Poirot was now certain, was not merely a killer. They were storytellers. Chapter 9. The solicitor's mirror of storm had lost its fury, reduced now to a whispering drizzle tapping against the mullioned windows of Renfield Hall. Like a polite but persistent question, Poirot sat in the study, the fire now reduced to low, pulsing embers. As Bernard Claypole stepped in with his usual air of angular precision, every movement deliberate, every word weighed before utterance. Claypole wore his professionalism like armor. His jacket remained buttoned. His collar is sharp. Not a single hair of his thinning auburn fringe was out of place. He took the chair opposite Poirot with the calm detachment of a man in court, ready to defend but never to confess. Poirot offered no immediate question. He simply studied him, letting silence stretch like a taut wire. Claypole folded his hands. "Shall I assume you believe I had a reason to kill my employer?" Poirot's expression didn't flicker. "I believe every person in this house had a reason or something very much like one. I am only here to determine whose reason took form. Then allow me to save us both time." Claypole said evenly, "I did not strike Sir Hugo, nor did I steal the key. But you admit the drawer may contain something worth stealing?" The solicitor allowed a thin smile. "Monsieur Poirot, I draft wills. I know better than most how tempting secrets become when they are neatly folded behind a lock. And Sir Hugo, did he ever consult you recently? To make changes?" Claypole's fingers drummed once on his knee. He spoke in riddles, said he wanted to upend expectations, that he was revising a private letter to be stored separately from the official documents. When I asked him what that meant, he simply said, "You'll understand when the board is reset." Poirot nodded slowly. He liked metaphors, especially chess ones. Claypole's gaze sharpened. He liked power, and he enjoyed seeing people squirm at the hint of inheritance lost or granted. "Yet you remained his solicitor, because I respected the law, not the man." Poirot's brows lifted. "An interesting distinction. It allowed me to do my job with clarity," Claypole said. "Emotions cloud judgment, especially in matters of money. And yet," Poirot said, leaning forward, "money is rarely what drives people. Fear, revenge, shame, these are the stronger currencies." Claypole paused, considering. "You think this is not about money at all, I think," Poirot replied softly. "This is about legacy. Sir Hugo was not merely killed. He was staged, positioned, the bishop at the head, the pawn in the hand. These are not details that speak of rage or panic, they speak of intent." Claypole said nothing. Poirot pressed on. "Dr. Halbrake mentioned that, during the moment of chaos, you remained in the drawing room for a breath longer than the others, that you reached toward the fireplace." Claypole's expression didn't change, but a flicker passed behind his eyes. "I adjusted a picture frame," he said at last. "It had tilted. The wind, perhaps." Poirot stared. "Or you recovered something. You've searched me," Claypole said dryly, "and found no key." Poirot smiled. "True, but a man of your kind does not act in the moment. He plans, he places pieces, and perhaps he waits for others to move first." Claypole crossed one leg over the other. "I don't like being played, Monsieur Poirot." "No one does," Poirot said gently. "But we are all pieces on someone's board. Even you." Claypole leaned back. "What is it you really want from me?" Poirot stood, adjusting the cuffs of his suit. "Only this. The truth always escapes in small details. A misremembered time. A word too carefully chosen. You said earlier that Sir Hugo was loyal in his way. Did you ever betray that loyalty?" Claypole's lips pressed into a thin line. "I drafted what he asked. I kept what he told me confidential. But I did not agree with all of his choices." Poirot paused at the door. "You were in a unique position. You knew his finances, his family history, even his intentions. You may not have struck the blow, but perhaps you opened the gate through which it came." Claypole rose, his voice controlled but tight. "If I am to be accused of anything, Monsieur Poirot, let it be this: I told the truth when the man himself preferred riddles." Poirot inclined his head. "Then let us hope the truth serves you better than it did him." As Claypole exited, Poirot stood alone by the flickering hearth, eyes on the burning logs. So far, each interview has produced more smoke than fire. But Claypole had moved like a knight at angles, indirect, and knights, Poirot mused, were dangerous because they leapt where others merely stepped. One must watch closely to see where they land. Chapter 10. The Queen from Venecer's Fenla entered the study with the grace of a chess piece gliding across polished marble, elegant, composed, and entirely enigmatic, dressed in deep burgundy silk that shimmered like red wine beneath a firelight. She took the velvet chair without needing an invitation. Her eyes, dark and deliberate, scanned the room as if she were the one conducting the interview. Poirot did not smile. He simply nodded once. "Mademoiselle Fenla, you arrived 2 days ago, yes?" "I did," she replied, her accent faint but musical, "though I was not expecting it, it seems." Poirot tilted his head. "Sir Hugo invited you?" "He wrote to me in April," she said, withdrawing a folded letter from her handbag. "He said we shared a bloodline, that he had discovered something, an omission in the family records. He asked me to visit Renfield Hall for the next turning of the King's hourglass." Whatever that meant, Poirot took the letter delicately, scanning the words in silence. The handwriting was unmistakably Hugo's, ornate, self-important, and tantalizingly vague. "You had never met him before?" Poirot asked. "Never," she said. "He claimed our ancestors were cousins, Venetian merchants who branched off, one line to England, one remaining in Italy. I didn't verify it. I came because I was curious, and perhaps because there was the suggestion of inheritance." Her lips curled faintly. "Everyone is curious when legacy is on the table. But I did not expect anything." "Not truly." Poirot lowered the letter. "Yet you were playing opposite him in the first match. A position of honor." Iris glanced away, then back. "He insisted. Said it would be symbolic. That I should see the board before the others see me." Poirot's eyes narrowed slightly. "Interesting. And during the game, what did you observe?" She folded her hands neatly in her lap. "He was relaxed, amused, but he kept glancing past me, toward the panel door, as though someone were late, or listening." "You did not ask?" "I had the impression he was waiting for someone to interrupt him." Poirot nodded slowly. "And when the crash came, I turned with the rest. He had just advanced as a bishop. I remember because he said, 'The church watches over all pawns, even the ones who don't know they've sinned.'" Poirot blinked. A cryptic remark. "What did you make of it?" "Nothing at the time. Now it sounds like a threat disguised as poetry." Poirot stood and walked toward the fireplace, then turned. "Mademoiselle, I must ask, who are you, really?" "The others in this house. They see a stranger. You appear from nowhere, with a charming letter and a name plucked from ancestry. But there are no records, no witnesses. How do we know you are who you say you are?" Iris didn't flinch. "You don't, but Sir Hugo believed I was real. That's what mattered to him." "To him?" Poirot echoed. "Or to you?" She met his gaze. "I came to learn the truth, whether I belonged to this family, whether I mattered to someone beyond a name. If I'd wanted fortune, I would have arrived with lawyers." Poirot nodded, but his voice remained cool. "And yet, you had access to the board, to the room, to the key." She tilted her head. "Are you accusing me, Monsieur Poirot?" "I accuse no one, but I observe. That Sir Hugo called you a queen, a pawn that reached the other side," she said softly. "He told me that, too." Poirot studied her face. "A queen can move in any direction. She is powerful, but vulnerable too, especially when she arrives too late in the game." Iris smiled faintly. "Or just in time to end it." Poirot turned, walking slowly to the chess cabinet. "Tell me, what would you have done if the drawer had opened and revealed?" "Nothing." Her answer was immediate. "Then I would have known what mattered was the invitation, not the reward." Poirot looked at her sharply. She stood, smoothing her skirt. "You want to know whether I struck him? I did not. I did not want him dead. I wanted him to tell me the truth." "Then someone silenced him," Poirot murmured. Before he could, Iris stepped closer, her voice low. "Or perhaps he left the truth behind, and he knew someone would kill him to keep it buried." Poirot's eyes glittered. "You believe this was inevitable?" "I believe," she said, "that secrets never stay hidden. Not forever." She walked to the door, paused, and turned. "Be careful, Monsieur Poirot. The person who killed Sir Hugo may be willing to kill again." She vanished down the corridor. Poirot remained still. Iris Fenla was not a pawn of that, he was now certain. She was also the key to the mystery, or a queen captured before she could play her final move. Chapter 11. The drawer that stayed shut. Morning crept into Renfield Hall like an intruder, muted, gray, and cautious. The storm had passed, leaving puddles pooled like secrets in the stone courtyard and a restless stillness. Inside the manor's halls, a constable was due to arrive by midday, but Poirot wasted no time. The house, still heavy with tension, had become his chessboard, and now he was ready to make his next move. At precisely 8 o'clock, Poirot summoned all remaining guests to the drawing room. They came reluctantly. Lady Renfield arrived first, veiled in a shawl and restraint. Geoffrey followed, bleary-eyed but sober, keeping a watchful distance from Iris, who entered with the poise of someone rehearsing grief. Celestini appeared moments later, her notepad tucked beneath one arm, and Claypole, as punctual as ever, trailed behind her. Adjusting his cufflinks, Dr. Halbrake brought up the rear, rubbing sleep from his eyes but carrying the solemn gravity of a man who had never quite stopped diagnosing. The marbled chessboard still stood untouched on the central table. Its pieces, reset by Poirot during the night, now formed an arrangement carefully chosen to mirror the moment. Just before the fatal blow, black bishop forward, white knight poised, the center cleared as if anticipating violence. Poirot stood beside it, hands behind his back. "Ms. Amos," he began, his voice calm but crisp. "The key to the drawer is still missing, but I do not need to open the drawer to understand what was inside." A ripple passed through the group. "You see," he continued, "Sir Hugo Renfield was not merely a man of games, he was a man of secrets. He gathered them, observed them, and then, when it suited him, deployed them with the precision of a final move." He stepped away from the board and toward the cabinet, lightly touching the black drawer. "Each of you had reason to fear what this drawer contained. Not because of greed, though perhaps that was present. No, because Sir Hugo's real power was not money. It was knowledge. And that," Poirot tapped the cabinet gently, "is what made this drawer dangerous." Claypole spoke first, his voice low. "And what do you claim was in it, Poirot?" Poirot turned to him. "A revelation, one that would shift the power dynamic in this house. I believe Sir Hugo had uncovered a truth that changed everything, possibly a rewritten will, perhaps a letter of confession, or the proof of a blood tie long denied." His eyes moved to Iris. "Perhaps the proof that Miss Fenla was indeed a Renfield." Iris's lips parted, but she said nothing. Poirot continued, "Or something even more destructive. Something implicating one of you in a past misdeed. Something that, if made public, would tarnish reputations, destroy alliances, or shatter a legacy." "Speculation," Celestini said quietly, but her tone was more weary than indignant. "None," said Poirot firmly. "Logic." He stepped to the center of the room. "Sir Hugo intended to reveal the contents of the drawer after the final match against me, but he never reached it. Instead, he was lured to the library, struck with a piece chosen not for its weight, but its meaning, Poirot gestured to the bishop. The bishop symbolizes power cloaked in faith, judgment, knowledge passed down with ritual. It was not a weapon, it was a signature. Lady Renfield's voice cracked. Then, who was he judging? Poirot's gaze lingered on each face in turn. That is what I intend to discover. He moved back to the chessboard. We now know this. The killer was prepared. The piece was selected in advance or taken swiftly in the confusion. The drawer remained locked, yet the key vanished. And above all, the scene was composed, not improvised. Geoffrey stepped forward. Are you saying the murder wasn't the point? That the real goal was the drawer? Exactement, said Poirot. The drawer, or rather, what it threatened to expose. The murder was a means of silencing. The bishop the pawn. The missing key, each one a step in a planned sequence. He paused. Which brings us to the critical question. If the killer took the key, where is it now? He let the silence grow. Then, slowly, Poirot turned to Lady Renfield. You were the first to scream, the first to reach the body. Her face paled. But, Poirot continued softly, you never knelt. You never touched him. You never even crossed the threshold fully. Lady Renfield's hands trembled. You think I took it? I think, Poirot said gently, you had as much reason as anyone to fear what your husband had written. Perhaps he had planned to expose infidelities. Perhaps to divert his estate. Or perhaps, his voice dropped, to reveal a scandal even older. Claypole bristled. Are we now fishing for ghosts? No, monsieur, Poirot said. We are following the trail of fear, because only fear drives a person to act so swiftly, so precisely. He looked once more at the drawer. I do not yet know who took the key, but I know this, whoever it was, they still have it. He turned, facing the group, and they are hoping, even now, that no one else ever sees what lies within. The fire cracked, and Poirot smiled just barely. Let us see, Ms. Amos, how long they can keep it closed. Chapter 12. Echoes from the ash drawing room dispersed slowly, like smoke curling from a dying fire. The tension that Poirot's words had ignited did not extinguish it, smoldered in glances, lingered in footsteps down polished corridors, and echoed in the silence left behind. For now, no arrests, no accusations, only the promise that one of them still held the key, both literal and metaphorical, to the mystery left behind in the black drawer. Poirot waited until the others had gone. Then he returned to the library. Alone now, the room felt colder, though the coals still pulsed behind the iron grate. Sir Hugo's body had been respectfully moved, covered by a sheet, in an adjoining room, at Poirot's request, but the imprint of his death remained. A faint trace of blood, scrubbed but not erased, stained the rug. The chess piece, once placed so deliberately beneath his head, was gone, now secured in Poirot's care. But the image, the symbolism, endured. He knelt by the fireplace, scanning the brickwork. Ah, he murmured. His fingers brushed along a blackened hearth tile, not part of the original floor. It bore faint, unnatural scratches too precise to be random. He pressed gently, and the tile gave way, revealing a shallow hollow beneath. Empty. Poirot's eyes gleamed. So it was hidden here. He stood slowly. The killer had not merely taken the key, they had retrieved it from a place only someone close to Hugo could have known. A secret cubby in the very room where he died. A hiding place born of habit and ritual. A drawer locked, a key concealed, and a witness silenced just before the truth could be told. He returned to the hall and found Celestini standing just beyond the library threshold, her notepad in hand. May I? She asked. He nodded. Always. I can't sit still, she admitted. Writing keeps my mind straight. The rest of the house feels poisoned. Poirot studied her. You cared for him. Her eyes flicked up. Yes, and hated him. Both can be true, he said gently. She hesitated. He was cruel with his knowledge, always hinting at some damning secret. I sometimes wondered if he kept me around not for competence but because I knew too much. To be safely dismissed, Poirot leaned against the doorframe. Did you know about the hearth tile? She blinked. The hearth. There is a hollow beneath one tile, large enough to hold a key. Celestine's lips parted. I didn't know, but it fits. Hugo hid things in plain sight then dared you to notice. Poirot smiled faintly. He was playing a long game, a dangerous one, she said, and one he didn't finish. Poirot looked toward the west wing. No, but perhaps someone else did. He turned to her again. The bishop beneath his head, do you believe he placed it there? She hesitated. No, that wasn't Hugo's style. He enjoyed metaphor, but he wanted his enemies to unravel it themselves. Then someone staged it. Poirot murmured, someone who wanted us to see it. And see it wrongly. He glanced at her. Would Sir Hugo ever let someone alter the arrangement of the pieces on the board during a match? Never, she said with certainty. He was obsessive. If a pawn was out of place, he'd stop everything until it was corrected. Poirot's brow furrowed. Then the pawn in his hand, if not part of the match, was planted. A message again. But for whom? For all of us, Celestine said quietly. The pawn is the one used, manipulated, sacrificed. The person who took the key may not be the killer, or, Poirot replied, they may be both. A soft knock interrupted them. It was Dr. Halbrake. I've examined the body more thoroughly, he said. There's something strange. Poirot motioned him inside. Halbrake closed the door and lowered his voice. There was a faint ink stain on the inside of Hugo's left palm. Very faint, near the base of the thumb. Poirot's eyes narrowed. Ink. Yes, not from writing. It wasn't on the fingertips. It looked smudged, as if he'd gripped something recently written. Poirot straightened. A letter. A confession. Something not yet dry. Possibly, said Halbrake. It's gone now, of course. Whatever it was, it's not with the body. Poirot exhaled through his nose. Then the killer didn't just take the key, they took whatever Hugo had planned to reveal. Halbrake nodded. And whatever it was, he had it in his hand when he died. Poirot turned back toward the fireplace. Toward the empty hearth. There had been more than one message left behind. One by Hugo, and one by the murderer. The challenge now was deciphering which was which. And whether the final move had already been made or whether, beneath the calm, someone was still playing. Chapter 13. A night in Retrieve. Noon light filtered weakly through the stained glass windows of Renfield Hall, casting long slashes of blue and amber across the marbled floors. Outside, the constable's arrival was delayed by the still-flooded road, and inside, Poirot's investigation moved with quiet intensity. He had summoned Geoffrey Renfield once more, not to study this time, but to the conservatory, where the scent of damp ferns and faint citrus lent the air an almost deceptive calm. Geoffrey stood with his back to the French doors, arms folded, gazing out across the sodden garden. His reflection shimmered faintly in the glass, wavering like a figure unsure of his own shape. I suppose you've brought me here to prod at me again, he said. Not turning, Poirot stepped forward, his voice calm. I have found that those who carry pain often prefer the garden to the drawing room. Geoffrey gave a low laugh. Is that what I am? A wounded soul? Poirot tilted his head. You are a son, and your father has been murdered. At last, Geoffrey turned. Do you believe I did it? Poirot did not answer directly. You had motive, resentment, a complex relationship, but you also had something else. What? Time, Poirot replied. Time to think, to observe, to recognize a pattern before anyone else. Geoffrey frowned. What are you saying? Poirot gestured to a wrought iron table, where he had arranged the ivory pawn and a facsimile of the black bishop, both pieces now sealed in bags, their symbolism more volatile than their weight. You understand these pieces, do you not? Poirot asked. Geoffrey nodded slowly. The bishop moves diagonally indirect, strategic. The pawn, forward only, but underestimated. It can become anything. Poirot studied him. Do you see yourself in either? Geoffrey was quiet for a moment. I used to think I was a pawn, controlled, sacrificed. But now, I'm not sure. Perhaps I've become something else. Your father saw the board as life itself, Poirot said. Every relationship is a position. Every word, a move. And you as only son, perhaps the most important piece of all. Unless, he paused, he no longer saw you that way. Geoffrey's mouth tightened. You think he was going to write me out of the will? I think he was preparing for change. He planned to open that drawer in front of everyone. That suggests spectacle, revelation. He was going to unmask someone or something. Geoffrey's brow furrowed. You think he was going to expose me? Poirot did not answer. Instead, he asked, did your father ever confide in you about the past? A scandal, perhaps. Something buried. Geoffrey looked away. He said there was a mistake in the family history. That he had corrected it. What sort of mistake? I don't know. He never said. But he told me once, years ago, that bloodlines were not as loyal as names. I thought it was just another one of his cryptic jabs. Poirot nodded. And Miss Fenla? What was your true impression of her? Geoffrey hesitated. She's poised, intelligent, but I don't trust her. She said she came for truth, not inheritance, but something in her eyes says otherwise. She watches everyone as though she's trying to guess their moves. Perhaps she is, Poirot said. Or perhaps she's afraid someone is watching hers. Geoffrey's expression darkened. You think she's in danger? I think she's either the reason for the crime or its next victim, Poirot said gravely. A gust of wind rattled the glass panes behind them. For a moment, both men stood in silence. Finally, Geoffrey asked, why bring me here? Why tell me this? Poirot looked at him evenly. Because I believe you are not telling me everything. You were in the library before the others, weren't you? Geoffrey paled. You arrived seconds before the others and saw your father already dead. How? Poirot tapped his temple. The muddy prints near the rug. Only one set was fresh. The rest overlapped. Yours was first. Geoffrey sank into the iron chair. I thought, maybe he wasn't dead yet. I panicked. I didn't know what to do. Poirot approached. Did you touch him? No, I swear. But you saw something, didn't you? Something in his hand. Geoffrey hesitated. Then, in a whisper, a folded sheet of paper. Ink still wet. Poirot's breath caught. And I didn't take it, I swear. But when the others arrived, it was gone. Poirot stepped back, silent. So the note had existed. Geoffrey had seen it, but who had taken it? And who had feared what it said? The answer, Poirot knew, lay not just in the words on that page but in the hands that had stolen them. And those hands, he suspected, were now very close to checkmate. Chapter 14. The move before the stormed late afternoon sun filtered through the hallway's tall windows, throwing long amber shafts onto the parquet floor. Renfield Hall had fallen into one of those deep silences that felt less like calm and more like anticipation, a hush before the final move. When all pieces stood tense and poised, Poirot walked slowly through the house, letting the stillness settle around him. He had interviewed each guest, reconstructed the board both literal and figurative, and noted the faint tremors behind every word. Now, he required something more than deduction. He required confirmation. He found Celestini in the reading nook, seated in a high-backed chair beneath the portrait of Sir Hugo's father. She was thumbing through one of the books from the chess library on composed endgames, but not really reading it. I wonder, Poirot said gently, if the dead speak most clearly through the unfinished things they leave behind. Celestini closed the book and regarded him carefully. Are you referring to the drawer? Or the letter that's gone missing? Poirot didn't answer right away. He approached the window and traced a circle in the fogged pane. Both, perhaps, but also the unfinished match, the one between Hugo and Miss Fenla. Celestine's eyes narrowed. He intended it to be symbolic. Yes, Poirot said, and I believe it was. He wished to crown a pawn, to show that someone long diminished had risen beyond the reach of the family name. Celestine's fingers tightened on the armrest. Did you know what he intended to reveal? He asked. No, she said. But the pause before the word was too precise. You've been loyal to him for years. Poirot continued. Not because you liked him, but because you feared what he might say if you left. Celestine said nothing. Poirot turned toward her. The real question is, what did you stand to lose if he revealed the contents of the drawer? Her gaze was unblinking. More than anyone in that house will ever understand. Poirot nodded. And yet, you did not kill him. Her breath caught then released. You're certain? She asked softly. Yes, Poirot said. Because it would have been inelegant. You are precise, measured. His murder was staged. Yes, but with theatrical flair. It was dramatic, not meticulous. Someone else acted with impulse and desperation. She looked at him, quietly stunned. Then who? Poirot smiled faintly. That is the move I am about to play. He left her there in silence and returned to the drawing room. The pieces were still on the board. He reset them one final time, not to reflect the match that had been played, but the one that had been interrupted. Knight to f3, bishop to c4. The classic king's gambit, a game of early aggression and revealed intention. As he stood back, the sun fell directly on the cabinet. And for the first time, Poirot noticed something odd. The velvet inside the box that had once held the silver key, the imprint left behind, was not merely a smooth depression. It was lined with a faint dusting of white. He leaned closer. Not dust, powdered marble. His eyes widened. A faint, almost imperceptible abrasion in the velvet fibers torn. Not worn. Someone had pressed the key hard into the velvet, as if to match its outline, or to replace it. He opened the drawer carefully, expecting to find nothing. It was still locked, but then he noticed the tiniest nick on the outer rim. Poirot turned abruptly and left the room. He found Bernard Claypole in the lounge, reading the Daily Telegraph as though murder investigations were nothing more than a mild inconvenience. Ah, said Poirot, you are still here. Claypole looked up. Were you expecting I'd bolt? Not very solicitor-like. Poirot walked forward and held out his hand. Your pocket, s'il vous plaît. Claypole blinked. I beg you replace the key with a copy carved from marble, Poirot said, voice like flint. Identical in weight and size, but brittle. The original, I believe, is in your coat pocket. You made the switch during the confusion, didn't you? And locked the drawer again, thinking no one would test it. Claypole's expression froze. Poirot stepped closer. You were the one person who could access the velvet-lined box without suspicion. You knew how long you'd need. And when the moment came, you took what Sir Hugo had hidden and sealed the drawer once more. Claypole slowly rose to his feet. Even if that were true, Poirot, it doesn't make me a killer. No, Poirot agreed. But it makes you a coward. And cowards, monsieur, often become accomplices. Claypole's jaw tensed. You can't prove I took it. Poirot's eyes narrowed. But I can prove you tried to prevent anyone from opening the drawer before the authorities arrived. Claypole said nothing. Poirot stepped back. Your move, monsieur. But remember, it only takes one false step for a night to fall. He turned and walked away. Outside, thunder rumbled again, not from the sky, but from within. The storm wasn't over. It was circling back. Chapter 15. Checked clock struck 6. The chime echoed through the hallways of Renfield like a signal bell before the plunge. Poirot stood in the grand corridor outside the drawing room, staring at the oil painting of Sir Hugo in his younger years, a portrait of precision, arrogance, and ambition. The eyes, sharp and dark, seemed to mock the living even in death. Behind Poirot, footsteps approached on the polished floorboards. It was Iris Fenla, her heels quiet, her figure cast in silhouette by the long stained-glass window. "You asked me to meet you," she said, voice low. Poirot turned. "Oui, mademoiselle. The time has come." She folded her arms. "For what?" "To open the drawer." Her eyes widened slightly. "You found the key." Poirot gave a small nod. "I recovered it, hidden inside a rolled document in Mr. Claypole's coat lining. It had been wrapped in waxed paper, tucked behind false stitching. Ingenious, but not invisible." Her lips parted. "He took it. He did. But he did not kill Sir Hugo. Of that, I am now certain." She exhaled slowly. "Then it wasn't about inheritance, was it?" Poirot's gaze deepened. "No, it was about identity. About truth is long suppressed." He extended his arm. "Come, you should be there when it is revealed." They to walk together to the drawing room. The others were already present, Geoffrey pacing near the fireplace, Celestini standing stiffly by the window, Lady Renfield seated in a low armchair with her shawl drawn tightly around her. Dr. Halbrake stood with arms crossed, lips pressed thin. Claypole lingered near the door, his face unreadable. Poirot stepped to the chess cabinet. He held the real key aloft. Then, without flourishing, he slid it into the lock. A soft click. He opened the black drawer. Inside was a single envelope, thick and sealed with red wax. A second object lay beside it, an aged family photograph. 6 people, a young Hugo Renfield, a woman with dark Italian eyes, and 4 children. Poirot lifted the envelope and turned to face the room. "This," he said, "was the heart of the game, the revelation that Sir Hugo prepared." "Shall I read it aloud?" Lady Renfield's voice came out sharp and thin. "If you must." Poirot broke the seal. He read in silence, first eyes scanning quickly, brow furrowing slightly, then cleared his throat. "To whomever opens this drawer, know this: Iris Fenla is my daughter, not adopted, not a cousin, my blood, born of a brief affair with Bianca Fenla while traveling in Venice. I kept her existence secret for decades, not out of shame, but because I feared what such knowledge would do to Geoffrey. Now, as I near the end of my games, I intend to put my pieces in order. The new will includes her. She will share in the estate equally with my son, Hugo Renfield." The room went still. A sharp gasp escaped Lady Renfield's lips. Geoffrey looked stricken. "I never knew," he whispered. "He never told me." Poirot folded the letter carefully. "Now we understand." The pawn in Hugo's hand. It was not a warning. It was a gesture of recognition, a piece that had reached the other side. Iris stood frozen, her breath shallow. "He intended to announce this after the final match," Poirot said, "to explain the truth to all, and perhaps, for the first time, to act with something like decency." Lady Renfield rose unsteadily. "He was going to give it all away, to her, to both of you," Poirot corrected. "He did not seek to punish, only to reveal." Celestini spoke softly. "But someone couldn't allow that. Someone acted to silence him first." Poirot looked to the fireplace. "To preserve a name, or a legacy, or a lie." He turned to the group, his voice cool and calm. "The time for secrets is over. The final move comes now." He met each gaze, one by one, because the killer is here, and they knew, before anyone else, what this drawer contained. He let the silence grow dense and sharp. Then he said, "And I will now reveal who it was. But not yet. That would be the checkmate." And Poirot never moved too early, only exactly when the board demanded. Chapter 16. The Final Gambit. Tension in the drawing room was now a living thing. It pressed in against the windows. It coiled around the legs of the furniture. It beat behind every nervous blink and clenched jaw. Outside, dusk gathered like an audience waiting for the curtain to fall. Inside, Poirot stood before the group with the air of a conductor moments before his final crescendo. "You must forgive me," he said, gently smoothing the front of his waistcoat, "for drawing this out. But as you know, I am a man of precision, and precision requires patience. No one moved. The crime we have witnessed, Mzamas, was not one of passion. It was not a spur-of-the-moment fury, nor an act of blind desperation. No, it was calculated, planned, the work of someone who knew that what Hugo Renfield intended to reveal would shift the balance of legacy and power." His eyes settled on Lady Renfield. "You, madam, had a motive. Your place in this house, in society, was rooted in the appearance of a complete family. Your husband's infidelities were known, but tolerable as long as they remained discreet. But a daughter, presented before the world and legitimized in writing, that would not do." Lady Renfield's lips pressed into a thin line, but she said nothing. Poirot turned to Claypole. "You, monsieur, had access. You stole the key during the chaos, but not to protect your own interests. You stole it at the request of someone else, or perhaps to delay discovery until you could decide where your loyalty lay. But you are not the killer." Claypole's jaw twitched, but he gave a short nod. Poirot faced Geoffrey next. "You, Mon Garcon, had every reason to hate your father, but you are not your father. You saw the note. You told the truth, and you had no opportunity to commit the murder unseen." Geoffrey exhaled shakily, his fists still clenched. Then Poirot's gaze moved gently, but without wavering, to Dr. Halbrake. "And you, Doctor," he said softly, "you were the last one I wished to suspect. The quiet observer, the family friend, the one who saw but never spoke." Halbrake's brow furrowed, his stance tightening. "You're mistaken." Poirot stepped closer. "No, mon ami. You were the only one with both access and understanding. You knew of Sir Hugo's condition, his blood pressure, his weaknesses. You had tended to this family for decades. And most importantly, you knew this secret before anyone else. That's absurd." Halbrake snapped. Poirot held up a single hand. Sir Hugo's cryptic remarks, a chess match between brothers who don't know they're brothers. That was not about Iris and Geoffrey. It was about you and him. A beat of stunned silence. "What?" Geoffrey murmured. Poirot's voice dropped. "Yes, you, Dr. Halbrake, are Hugo's illegitimate half-brother. Same father, different mothers. You learned this from records long buried, perhaps during your medical studies, perhaps later. But you never spoke of it. Not until Hugo confronted you, quietly, perhaps even cruelly." Halbrake shook his head. "That's ridiculous, but plausible," Poirot said. "He dangled the truth, teased the existence of a sibling who did not know they were a sibling, and then ignored your existence again." He paused. "But when you heard he intended to rewrite the will, to give Iris half of everything, you realized he would never recognize you, never share the legacy. He would rather give it to a daughter born of a brief affair than to the brother who had been beside him for years." Halbrake's lips trembled slightly, but he said nothing. Poirot continued, quietly now. "You waited until the drawing room had quieted, then followed Hugo through the servants' passage to the library. You struck quickly, silently. You used the Black Bishop not just as a weapon, but as a symbol. You cradled his head upon it, not out of mercy but because he had always played judge. You wanted him to die under the weight of his own arrogance." Celestini gasped. Halbrake's shoulders slumped. Poirot finished softly. "And the pawn? You placed it in his hand as a final irony. Because you were the pawn, weren't you? Moved across the board by others. Always underestimated. Never crowned." Halbrake looked up slowly. "I didn't mean to kill him. I only meant to make him stop. But he died," Poirot said. "Yes," Halbrake whispered. "And then I took the letter from his hand and burned it in the hearth. I thought it would all end there, that no one would ever know." Poirot nodded, then stepped back. The room was silent. Lady Renfield stood, trembling. Iris stared at Halbrake. Unreadable. Geoffrey looked as if a layer of his past had been peeled back and replaced with something heavier. Poirot simply said, "The constable will be arriving within the hour." Halbrake didn't resist as he sank slowly into a chair, the weight of his secret finally crushing him. The board had been cleared, the final gambit played, and Hercule Poirot, as always, had seen every move. Chapter 17. Resolution in the Ashest drawing room was still. No voices, no arguments, only the sound of a clock ticking softly over the fireplace, and the distant rustle of wind nudging the ivy along the window panes. Dr. Halbrake sat in silence, hands folded tightly in his lap, his eyes locked on the marbled chessboard that had once entertained a tyrant, and now condemned a man. Poirot remained standing, not triumphant, but still like a figure carved from stone, watching the last breath of the game long played. It was Celestini who spoke first. "I never guessed," she said quietly. "All these years, and he was right beside us." Poirot inclined his head, because he did not wish to be seen, not as a brother, not as a rival, only as the trusted family doctor. Halbrake exhaled shakily, almost to himself. He knew, of course he knew, but he didn't want the world to know. So he provoked me instead, humiliated me with riddles and metaphors, never offering a name, never acknowledging me directly. "Yet you stayed," Iris said, her voice even. "You could have walked away." He looked at her then. "I couldn't. This house was part of me, of what I was denied. I watched as Hugo gave affection to strangers and heirs to mistresses, and I remained a footnote in his shadow." Poirot gave a small nod. "And that, doctor, is what made you dangerous. You were close, quiet, invisible, outside." The sound of a motor car rumbled up the gravel path, the long-delayed arrival of the constable. Geoffrey moved to the window, watched without speaking. Behind him, Lady Renfield closed her eyes and sank deeper into her chair, the truth hanging over her like fog, thick, unrelenting, and somehow clarifying. Poirot stepped to the hearth once more, glancing down at the faint trace of ash where a letter had been burned. "There are always remnants," he said softly. "Even the most carefully destroyed truths leave behind embers." Halbrake stood slowly, his face pale but calm. "I will speak to the police. I won't resist." Poirot nodded solemnly. "Will you tell the truth?" "I have already begun," the doctor replied. Poirot turned to the others. "The legacy of Sir Hugo Renfield will now be rewritten, not as he planned, but perhaps as it always should have been." He faced Iris, who stood straight and unshaken. "And you, mademoiselle, will carry forward the truth, not the performance of it, not the illusion of blood and marble, but something cleaner." Iris gave a single, slow nod. Poirot walked to the door, paused, and looked back. "There are no victors in a game like this," he said quietly. "Only survivors." And then he left, the hall behind him filled with silence and, at last, something that resembled peace. Chapter 18. The quiet after the final moveth. Following morning dawned pale and clean. A sky of pearl and soft gold stretched above Renfield Hall. Rainwater glistened on hedges trimmed with obsessive care, and the gravel paths lay quiet under fresh light. It was as if the estate had exhaled its long-held breath, released at last. In the east wing, Poirot sat before a tray of strong coffee and dry toast, meticulously dressed as always, with not a wrinkle out of place. Hastings was not there, but Poirot conversed with silence just as effectively. His mind replayed every step, every contradiction, every human flaw hidden beneath polished shoes and starched collars. The murder of Sir Hugo Renfield, Poirot reflected, had never truly been about a drawer, or an inheritance, or even revenge. It had been about denial. Dr. Halbrake, long ignored, had not been killed in rage, but in humiliation. To be so close to recognition and yet perpetually unseen it had frayed his restraint, until a single provocation shattered it. The bishop was not just a weapon. It was a symbol of moral authority, of righteous judgment, of secrets kept behind closed cathedral doors. And the pawn, that, Poirot realized, had been Hugo's final message, a gesture of mercy, a recognition that he, too, had used people, that Iris had climbed the board not through wealth, but truth, that perhaps, in his final hours, Hugo had intended to make things right. Poirot had delivered his findings to the constable with all precision and grace. Halbrake had confessed calmly, escorted with dignity, his hands not bound, but trembling. Lady Renfield would retire to the countryside, far from scandal. Geoffrey, changed by the revelation, had refused to contest the new will. He had spoken to Iris that morning with a strained, yet sincere voice. "I don't know what we are," he had said, "but I suppose it's time we found out." As for Iris, she remained. She would oversee the settling of the estate, Poirot learned. But more than that, she would restore what Hugo had hollowed out. The house would no longer be a vault for secrets and silence. The drawer would remain empty. And Poirot? He prepared to leave. As he stepped into the waiting motor car, his hat carefully squared, Iris approached him beneath the entry's stone arch. "You saw it all," she said softly. Poirot gave her a modest smile. "Not all, mademoiselle. Only what was necessary." She offered her hand. "Merci, Monsieur Poirot." He bowed and took it. "Play the game your way now. But remember, there is no winning without kindness." She nodded. The car pulled away, tires crunching over gravel, the manor receding in the rearview mirror like a closed chapter. As Renfield Hall disappeared behind the trees, Poirot turned his face to the sun. Another game completed. Another truth revealed. And the board, once again reset.